You mentioned earlier that you don't like the data structure and interview questions for like an iOS position. So what's your approach to that?
I left this company after 9 years, and it was a difficult decision. I actually cried about making this decision because it was like cutting off a limb, figuratively speaking. Not as painful, of course, but it was really like I had to like uh, basically say goodbye to something that was so integral to my identity. Make sure that you're not just about software development. Develop yourself in other aspects.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to an episode of the iOS Dev Podcast. In this episode, I had a chance to speak with Jeroen Leenarts. Jeroen is the organizer of the Do iOS conference that takes place in the Netherlands. He's also the host of the AppForce1 podcast, and he's also a developer relations manager at Stream. What's the criteria you look for when selecting a speaker for the conference?
That's a good one. Most important is the topic that the person wants to talk about, because it has to be something that is not conflicting with sessions that are already planned on the roster. But then also the quality of the entry itself. That's the second thing that you look for. Because if somebody is able to express themselves in written English, then you'll probably have a good chance that they can also verbally express themselves well, at least well enough that people can understand what they're talking about. And after that, it's a bit of a gut feeling, really. You have to because the process is anonymized, so I don't know who the actual person is behind the proposal. There is some guessing involved there, because I don't want to have like the big names only on the conference, because I do like to have like a big name because it's good for the tickets. But I also like to give people a chance that are trying to get into speaking. So I do throw in like one or two wild cards, so that I'm like, this is like a proposal that looks a bit iffy, but I do like the tone, or there's something that stands out, and then I have a tendency to pick up on those and ask them to join as a speaker. And once I did my initial selections, then I will de-anonymize, and then you will also do another round across all papers, because you do want to guard against having a strong bias in your lineup in regards to diversity. So that's also something you have to take into account when picking speakers. But you do want to base it mostly on the merit of their proposals.
So for the merit, it's like the topic that they want to talk about and also how in depth they can go, like in the proposal.
Yeah, it well, if you look at a conference, it's not just a set of non-related talks. At least that's not what I try to put together as a conference schedule, because you do want to have some sort of a arc in the experience that people are having. So like first session in the morning, you don't want to go like deep hardcore coding and just like making people's ear flap, and then that you don't want to have them start snoozing like in the first hour, right? You do want to ramp it up, so that's more like a reflective talk or something that is more introductory or looking ahead into the future. So it's like more grand scheme of things. How are things developing? What can we expect? What did we do? What went well? So, and then you want to gradually go like to a sort of like a technical overview talks. So that's like, okay, this new Swift data framework, what is it about? What can we do with it? And then the second half of the day, you want to make sure that you really dive deep with a few technical talks. And this, in my case, applies to a single track conference, of course, because people, they don't have a choice in what sessions they get to choose. They either go to the session or they don't. But I do plan on having like a little bit of a story arc, and then at the end of the day, when people are already like filled up with all kinds of things and technical detail, you want to like slow down a little bit and do like a really either a really fun talk that's like funny in the sense the speaker is really good, or you want something that is like really engaging on another level, that it's really about, okay, you have software development, but what is everything around software development, perhaps, because that's a potential direction you could take with these talks.
Oh, so you look at how the proposals they'll fit in the story, right? Like if they fit or don't fit, then you base it off of that.
Yeah. For instance, if you look at the DuOS plan for this year, I've got Donny Walls doing a concurrency workshop, and I've got Daniel Steinberg doing a Swift Data workshop the day before the conference. So that already ties me to having some sort of a talk that is related to Swift Data and Swift concurrency in some way, because you want to have the thing that was in the workshop that has to come back in the conference, right? So that's already a restriction that I put on myself. I need to have a good Swift Data talk. I need to have a good Swift concurrency talk. Well, luckily, I already have my Swift Data talk covered with Drew McCormack, because he's, and hardly anybody knows him, it seems, but he's like the creator of an Apple Design Award winner of an app called agenda.com. Definitely check it out. It's a really cool note-taking app. But what they did is some interesting things with their sales model, but also they based everything in their app on core data. That's just because Drew told me that at a Cocoa SNL meetup, so a local developer meetup, and he's heavily involved with making sure that they get ready with their entire core database stack towards a Swift database stack. So he's already experimenting with it a lot. So that's a solid talk that I got there, because I know Drew can do a really good conference talk, at least in my experience. And if you then look at the concurrency talk, I've got Donny Walls. He's writing a book about Swift concurrency right now. So I need something there as well. But I don't want to use Donny Walls there. I have him as a backup, but I don't want to put him on the spot. Yeah, you did a workshop, now do a talk, because then it's, especially for people who went to the workshop, it's a lot more of the same, because he doesn't give a different perspective. He just probably gives a very condensed version of his workshop. So I need to find someone who can do a solid concurrency talk and give a bit of a different perspective on Swift concurrency and what their experience and ideas about that are. So that's already two very technical topics I have covered. And then I need to get like other topics as well, because people, they're bound to want to have like a Vision OS talk or something that's
I
related
was just
to
thinking
that,
about
right?
that. Yeah.
That's like the elephant in the room right now with iOS conferences, or Apple Tech conferences anyways. So got that covered as well, with one of the speakers that is already on the website as well. It's Mariska is her name, I think, and she well, let's just keep it at like she has to have signed a lot of NDAs to be able to get the expertise that she has already. So I'm hoping that she can make a good story out of it, because she has to like wave around a few of these legal sharks to make sure that she doesn't spill the beans on Apple there. And yeah, and then there's some pet topics that I just want to have in there. So I want to have something that is a little bit more soft skills, more project related, that people can take home and just run a better project next time. And it's with every talk that I select, there's one criteria, and it's like, if people go to this talk, is there a good chance that they come out of this talk with one or two things that they can apply either tomorrow or next week, or at least within a month, so that they have like an actual meaningful improvement in their product, their developer life cycle, or their development experience that is actually worthwhile for them to have gone to this talk in this conference. And if people can take that home like 14 times over, because I've got 14 talking spots, then I think people want to come back next year as well. So
Yeah. Do you have a favorite part of that story arc?
Best part is always the first talk, I think, because the very first talk of the conference, because that's the point in time, because I still have control over the introduction. I can say about this presenter that is coming on stage in whatever shape, way, or form that I want. But then that's the moment in time that this pet project of mine, that I just really need to let go, and because now it's out of my control. Now somebody else is literally taking over the stage, and I just need to hope for the best. And and of course, even if you have the worst speaker on stage that you can imagine, that's fine, because I know the audience that comes to do iOS. And well, if there's a bad speaker on stage, it can happen. I trust my lineup and my selection process. Last year we didn't have any bad speakers, luckily. But there's also a part of it is also there are specific sponsors which I will not name, that I specifically avoid because of the type of conference talks that they do. Because sponsors on a conference, they tend to want to have a speaking slot as well. And there are specific sponsors that I avoid for these reasons, because you get a very specific type of talk that I personally do not enjoy at a conference. And basically, the first talk is the best part of the day. But then I also really like at least I hope that I will like that. And that's the end of the first day, because then there's like a walking dinner. And that's basically a buffet dinner, and with all attendees, all presenters, all staff on site. So people they just roll out of the big auditorium. Then we pour in a few drinks, and then we serve the food. And I really hope that people will then start talking about their experience, and that I can just like cruise through the room a little bit and just get a feel of how people are experiencing the day. And the final thing that you say on stage is also a great feeling, because it's literally like when you do an exam for school or for your education. It's like if you know that you did a good exam and you put down the pen and you know you're done. That feeling, that's like that feeling, but then multiplied a few times. That's the final thing you do at a conference, and you can just put down the microphone. It's like, okay, it's done. And then of course people can raise some complaints afterwards, but that's always minor, because if there's really an issue, people come during the conference already, if it ever happens. But that's also an important, at least to me, an important part of the entire process, to really having the sense of closure that you're done, and hopefully we've done a good job. And that's it's sort of like a feeling of accomplishment.
Yeah, and I'm pretty certain after those 2 days, are you exhausted, or how do you?
I'm gonna scurry off home and just try and find my bed and sleep, but that's gonna be hard with 2 kids at home that will have missed me for 2 nights already. Then, so it's probably putting my kids to bedtime when I get home, if they're hopefully they're not sleeping then already, because I don't want to make it too late on the final day. And then the next day it's back to work again, and then the weekend, that's when I can catch up on some sleep, I guess. I did opt to sleep near the venue during the event, so the hotel that I'm staying in is like 5 minutes from the venue, and that's really just to save on my own energy, because you probably went to a few conferences yourself. As an attendee, it's already intense. And as an organizer, you're the first person on site. You're the last person to leave the site, and usually there's also something happening in the evening, and you're also usually one of the final people to to go to your hotel room and try and catch some sleep. But then when you're in your hotel room, you're still like buzzing in your head. It's like, okay, what happened today? Okay, what went well? What didn't go so well? Anything we need to adjust tomorrow? So usually as a conference organizer, the nights between the conference days, that's usually, well, if you can catch like 5 hours of sleep, then I think you did well.
Yeah, I spoke with Josh a few episodes ago, and yeah, he mentioned the same thing, like no sleep, pretty much.
Well, that's actually a very interesting anecdote related to Do iOS and Josh Holtz, because that's the Josh that you're referring to.
Yep. Yeah.
And that's actually the dates of the conference in Amsterdam on Do iOS in November. Because originally he was planning on a event that he would be attending in Taipei, that's somewhere in Asia. And then he wanted to come after that event to Do iOS, because like last year he couldn't come to Do iOS because he was having his wife was having a baby, or they just had a baby, and he didn't want to travel. But this year he said, like, yeah, I can do it, but it's only if it's this week and only if it's pretty much these dates. And I was like, yeah, sure, I will call the venue and see if they have availability. And it actually turned out that it was one of the cheaper options in November even. And I'm like, I'm fine with doing it like during the week and not attached to a weekend, because that's just fine for me. And that's actually the reason why the conference is on the dates that it actually is right now. It's because of Josh Holtz wanting to be a part of it. And and that's why it's on these dates in November. And that's November 7, 8, and 9.
That's funny. So if the dates were good for you, then you can thank them. And if they don't, then you can send some email at them.
Yeah, and demand some socks, of course, because he works at Revenue Cat.
And what initially got you into starting the conference, by the way?
Oh, that's an interesting story. We can do a whole episode on that actually. But the short story, and I hope I keep it short, is that I've been working for like a decade at my first employer. Then I switched jobs to a different employer because I wanted to get into iOS development. That was like in iOS 3, iOS 4 days. And when I made that switch, I did software development there for a few years on the iPhone OS and then iOS platform. And at some point, they wanted to do some more marketing that was more aimed at uh, getting software developers interested and just finding talent. And one of the things they were doing were conferences, and the whole idea there was that one of their consultants would be the technical lead on a specific topic, and they didn't have an iOS conference yet or anything Apple related. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. So I basically got like a bag of money and somebody from the marketing department, Wendy, I still remember her because she was great. And we basically got started. So the first Do iOS, that was in 2015, and it lost like a ton of money. It was like it was like ticket revenue was like 20K, and the whole cost of the event was like 40K. And that was that was fine because it was just marketing budget, right? We're spending money to get eyeballs and to get people interested in the company that I was then working on. Uh, company considered the event a success because they had a few hires from it. And that's the really weird thing with marketing, especially for talent acquisition. If you spend like a gazillion amount of euros or dollars and you are able to acquire 2 or maybe 3 talented people on your team and they stick around, it's like already a huge success. Because just for consideration, people that use a recruitment agency, the fee that agency is getting when you stick around at a company for like 6 months or longer is probably at least like half of your gross yearly salary. That's the amounts of money that transacts
Dang.
when one of these recruiters is successful. And that's also the reason why these let's keep it nice, why these people are so persistent on LinkedIn, because they just see dollar signs when they see your profile. Okay, back to the story. So we did that in 2015 and we did it again in 2016. Then mobile development got less important at this company, so they were winding down the team that was doing mobile development. At some point, I phased out of the company, and that was around the time that the second Do iOS was done. And I was hired as an external consultant to help organize it. It was a break-even success, so people were happy, people enjoyed it, and then the conference lay dormant for a few years. And then I was doing local developer meetups for iOS developers at that point in time as well. And at some point, I suggested to my old employer, hey, can we just maybe, I don't know, have the assets and everything related to Do iOS? It's a non-profit, transact it over, and we'll just run with it. And hey, you're a free sponsor for a year. And they was like, okay, take our stuff, and we want to be a sponsor because that's good. And that's just because we separate on a very good foot with each other. So that's also why it's important that if you leave a company, you do it nicely and you do it well. It's like a life advice session by now. And at that point, the conference was done for a third time by the Coca-Heads NL Nonprofit Foundation. That was like, I don't know, 2018, 2019. Don't pin me on the dates; they're on my website. So we did it 2 times with the Nonprofit Foundation, and then COVID happened. That's the correct order. So that was like somewhere 2019 or so that we did the final one, and then at some point it was this whole COVID thing. Everybody's working at home. You're not doing in-person events. And one thing that we ran into with the 4th edition of Do iOS was the cost of the event, because the nonprofit had some legal reasons that they want to stay below a certain amount of revenue, because otherwise we have to do a lot of paperwork and tax filing and all that stuff. And we didn't want to do that for the nonprofit because we want to keep it simple. So the idea was, okay, we need to offload this conference out of this nonprofit legal entity, because the revenue potential of this whole thing and also the cost potential of this whole thing is so big, it'll just be a tax headache for the nonprofit. So the team, which I'm a part of still, thought about it long and hard, and it was like, yeah, we need to find somebody who wants to take on the conference and basically run it on a legal entity of their choosing to run this event. And when this remark was made, I don't know, it was like 3 sets of eyeballs all of a sudden looking at me like, it's like, hey, you took this thing upon us. Maybe it's a good idea that you take it off our hands as well. And I had to think about it, but then it's at some point, I basically, on my own legal entity, I sponsored the nonprofit, and in return, they transacted the assets and all trademarks and everything related to the conference to my name. So and then it was on me, and I had to find sponsors, and that all basically happened like the beginning of February, March this year, 2023. And I basically started organizing then, and that's just in a short order how this whole Do iOS thing happened. And the reason why I started doing it is basically because somebody asked me to do it, and I'm one of these people that can go like, sounds like fun. What could possibly go wrong, right? It's like, who cares? And it really is what it was other people's money I was spending, so that was easy. There was no financial risk for me, so it was a very cushioned way of getting into this whole event organizing thing. And to take on a conference on my own, it did help that I did it 4 times over, because I organized all editions of Do iOS as the main organizer. And also that I've been running like local developer meetups for like, I don't know, 10 years already. And it really got me convinced that if you want to do like an event with people, for developers, there's a few things that you need. You need a place to do it. You need some food and drink so that people stay happy. You need people to show up. You need someone to basically talk about something that is hopefully a little bit interesting. And yeah, and you need some way to let people know that it's happening. Well, meetup.com used to be very well suited for that. I don't know how it is for a starting meetup community. But that's the 4 or 5 ingredients that you need. And if you can take those 5 things and you do them well, then well, you have to be careful with your finances and everything, but you can't go wrong there, I think.
Yeah. And so that was just this year, you said that you kind of took things on by yourself?
Yeah, it was an idea that was like sort of like percolating like in 2022 already, because after the whole pandemic thing, we got back to organizing these developer meetups again with Cocoheads NL. And it also the idea of, yeah, we have to do iOS. We did it twice. Do we want to do it a third time? And it's like, yeah, well, bookkeeping wise, it's a bit of a headache. And what should we do? So then the discussion started. And then I was still in the phase like, because of last year's Do iOS, no, I'm never doing a conference again, because that's a phase that most organizers go through right after having organized one. And then like start of this year, the idea of doing it again sort of started to feel exciting to me again. So then we started the conversation. Okay, we talked about not wanting to do it with the Cocoheads legal entity, the nonprofit. What else can we do? And then it basically was this conversation that with people looking at me that and then suggesting, well, maybe you should do it then. And that's like February, March time frame of this year that it really was like, well, we shook hands on it, really, literally. And then, of course, we need to do some paperwork.
Why did you not want to do it again? You mentioned that.
Because
was it the legal entity stuff, or was it
no.
else?
The Do iOS 2022 was quite a big success, because people were excited, they enjoyed themselves, and they were really asking, are you doing it again next year? My standard reply was, well, I don't know, let's just recover a little bit and then just see, because it's a bit like it's a bit like pulling teeth, because ahead of time you have a lot of apprehension, and then while it's happening, it's like the most god awful thing that can happen to you. And then afterwards, you think back to it, it's like you have like night sweats and everything. And then as time passes, for some reason, all this pain and suffering, it didn't feel so bad anymore all of a sudden. And with conference organizing, it's a bit of the same, because it's a very intense few weeks that you have with a long head start. So you have to start early, do all kinds of things. So it's a slow ramp up of all kinds of things, with a big apotheosis right at the event itself. And especially the last few weeks before the conference are exhausting, because there's so much stuff coming at you with like organizing plane tickets, hotel issues, speakers that fall ill or that can't get their visa, or anything that you can come up with, really. and then once the event is passed, it's I don't know what it is exactly, but I think it's sort of like a dopamine crash type of thing, because you really feel horrible for a week afterwards. And then I'm a person who has like this tendency, if I have a lot of tension, I get headaches afterwards. So usually after a conference, I have like 1 or 2 days of massive headaches, and that doesn't help either. But then once things pass on a little bit, it's like, yeah, well, it was actually a lot of fun, and it's a lot of responsibility, but also a lot of satisfaction attached to that. So, and then you gradually come to the point again that you think like, yeah, well, maybe let's do it again.
Yeah, you know, sometimes the struggle makes things worth it, right?
Yeah, definitely. And it's I haven't had anything happen at a conference thus far that was like truly horrible, and I hope that I will never see that day. Because yeah, well, it's a room packed with human beings, so there can always be like something like a medical emergency, for example. That's something you really have to think about if you bring like 200 people together. It's like there are some what if scenarios. Of course, you have the evacuation plans and everything of the venue that you're in, but also, okay, how am I going to maintain myself if certain things happen? And also, what are my options if the bad thing happen? Do we continue? Do we abort? Do we what do we do? And that's a little bit dependent on the exact situation, but that are things that you literally think about when organizing an event. It's like it's not only the fun stuff that you have to think about, and you do tend, at least I tend to rely a lot and heavily on the venue that I'm booking with, and I do want to have a venue that has good staff and good support systems, and has like a good brand and name in like the larger local community, so that I can trust them to do the right thing if the worst happens. But it is something that is a part of the process of, you get a lot of peace of mind if you know that you picked good people to work with, and they might not be the cheapest venue that you can book, might not be the cheapest caterer that you can book, it might not be the cheapest whatever that you can book, but it's one of those things like some things you just want to make sure that you get quality, and that's the main thing when also setting the ticket price, because I had to double the ticket price almost compared to last year, and that's just to be able to cover the expenses and the basically the level of quality that I want the conference to have. And 300 euros, it's a significant amount, but comparatively for a conference, it's not a lot. But yeah, so I still need to sell like a few more tickets, and then the event itself, the conference, will hit break even. Due to sponsors, I already hit break even like last week. But yeah, it's always good to have some margin there, so that people have a tendency to cancel a ticket last minute, and I don't want to be difficult about it. So you want to cancel? It's like a day ahead, fine. Just sorry you couldn't be here. So
Yeah.
I don't want to. I don't want. I want people to think like, okay, next year I do want to book this ticket again, and then I do intend to come.
And do you have a team for it, or is it just you? Or
No, it's
I'm
like
pretty sure you have a team,
it's
right?
like I have a team on the day. So and Do iOS 2022 was also I organized it alone as like the representative of then the nonprofit, and the people from the CoCatSNL nonprofit. By that At that time it was Marco, Bart, and Jolanda. Typical Dutch names actually, and they really helped on the day itself. And this year, they basically are my eyes and ears on the event day itself again. And Yolanda rotated out of monthly activities for the nonprofit, so she is still active, but she's not organizing anymore. And we acquired a new team member named King. And well, it's actually, I updated the site today, do-ios.com, and you can see them and as the support team. And those 4 people, they run on the day itself, and they help me get everybody inside the building, get everybody badged up, and that they are within the crowd. If people have issues, they know a face they can talk to, so that they can really help. And they also are capable of handling things, because we've been organizing developer meetups for like a decade already, and all of us are iOS developers by day. We just do this organizing thing because we like it, and they help me out with conference because they I don't know, because they like to help out, or maybe because they feel sorry for me. Could be either way. And but it's the whole lead up, the booking of venue, hotel, flights, doing the CFP. There are some other voices involved with the paper selection process, but basically I run everything. So it's I'm the I sometimes call myself the benevolent dictator of Do iOS because I'm in control, and
Yeah.
I do not accept any other opinions on that. I'm in control, and I think for a conference of this size and scale, like a few hundred people, that works best. And of course, if you do bigger events, yes, then you do need to have dedicated people running specific parts of the event, and it does have an influence on the decisions that I make for the event. For instance, what I said earlier about picking like a quality venue with quality catering and quality staff on their part. That's because I don't want to be on top of that. I want to be sure that if I basically pay somebody to take care of something, that I can just tick it off on my checklist and I know it is being taken care of. Or otherwise that they at least raise it with me that something is up and that I need to make decisions again.
Yeah. Now I kind of want to transition into more like iOS and career stuff.
Yeah.
That's fine. Well, how did you start with iOS? Because you weren't doing iOS originally, right? You were doing other software stuff.
No, I'm a software developer by education. So 1998, I started my it's equivalent to a university degree, and I did a 4-year program. Graduated in 2002 and started working at the company I did my graduation project, because the education I did was very much hands-on, practical, but on a level that is like comparable to a university degree. So and it's a bachelor level program that I did. So I started working in 2002 as a Java software developer at a consulting company. And as I already mentioned, I stuck around there for almost a decade. I worked there 9 years. I basically did everything that you can imagine possible with Java back in the day. And it's very funny because having done Java for such a long time, from Java 3 to like, I don't know, it was like Java 7, 8, or 9 or something when I stopped doing Java. It gives me a very interesting perspective on the Swift language development, because I've experienced the Java language evolving and developing itself. And of course, it's a little bit different, but I see the Swift programming language and it's like, it's literally the same thing happening over again, but with a different language. And in my mind, I see Swift at some point end up as a language that is too complex for most people's taste to fully grasp top to bottom. And with Java, that also happened. It was like there was so much features, so much stuff, so much framework, so much API. Nobody can know everything about this beast, really. So I did Java development for 9 years, and then I wanted to do iOS development because I was one of these people that was stupid enough to buy an iPod. That thing looked interesting, so that led to a MacBook, and then a MacBook. That was like in the interface builder days, actually. So Xcode was not a thing yet. You had Project Builder and Interface Builder, two separate programs to construct your software with. And it was like,
No, that was building apps for the iPod.
No. That was building apps for the Mac. So it was like,
For the Mac.
yeah, it was really this satellite effect that Apple was doing. You had an iPod, so that was your entry drug into the Apple ecosystem. Because it was a cool device, and it was relatively cheap to buy. It was an iPod Nano, actually. So it was like 2 sticks of gum size device. So that led to a MacBook Pro G4. It's like the original, really cool. I don't even know what the chipset was, but it was not Intel. So it was before the Intel transition. So I did some development with that, played around with that. Then that was just around the time that the iPad became a thing. So you had like the original iPad and you could program for that. And I was like, yeah, I want to get my hands on developing for these devices. So I pitched the idea in my then still employer, and they tried to get me a project, didn't happen. So I started looking elsewhere. So I ended up at other consulting company called Zebia, and that's also the company that helped me bootstrap the Do iOS conference and also the Cocoheads NL Foundation, because they basically paid for the incorporation of the nonprofit, and they basically paid for the first 2 editions of Do iOS. And then I basically got started there. No meaningful iOS development experience on my resume. Objective C looked like fun, right? Brackets. And it was like, yeah, well, I want to do mobile development for the Apple ecosystem, and I only will accept this job if you can get me one of those projects. And it just so happened to be that they just landed like a big contract at a Dutch bank, the ING bank, and they needed to send people there. And I just happened to fit that description sort of as like, I don't know, it was back in the days that, hey, you hire one of our consultants and you get a junior for free. And I, even though I had a decade of experience, I was the junior because my experience on the platform wasn't that great. And I was attached to a more senior developer, Andrew Snare.
How was that?
Oh, that was fine. He just had let me have it, and it was like, yeah, this is the code base, this is your development environment, this is how you set it up, this is how you compile it, this is your user story. Good luck, go build. And it was like, if you have questions, come to me. But in like 2 weeks' time, he basically gave us the green light at my then new employer and said like, yeah, it's fine. You can let this guy do his thing, and basically he won't take anybody's arm or leg or anything. So I worked on that project for like close to 4 years, like a single dedicated iOS project, and it was all written in Objective C. So at some point, I was like the king of memory leaks. It was like there was a memory leak, and I got these issues thrown at me, and it was like, yeah, you go solve this because you always fix them, right? So I was very much aware with like how the retaining and releasing and auto release pools worked. That was before Arc was a thing. You had to do all your memory management manually, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Because if you release something once too often, it was like the entire app basically exploded right in your face. And there were even worse things that you could do. So you actually had error messages in your console that would say dead beef, and there was a specific type of memory error that you triggered. And there's all kinds of tooling available. I still love instruments as a tool. It's so much better compared to back then, because it was also the time when Xcode started becoming a thing. And I literally experienced the great migrations of the Swift language, like right up close and personal. So having like a significant part of the code base in Swift 2, and then have to migrate it to Swift 3 and all the intermediate versions. It basically was, at some point, there was a new Xcode version released by Apple, and it was like a worldwide Apple developer oh crap moment that happened, because it literally was like, okay, drop everything, start migrating your code to the new Swift version. So I was working at this project for like close to 4 years, and then I wanted to do something else. Wanted to live a little bit, work a little bit closer to my home, because kids become a thing. So I started looking for a job, ended at a local app agency that didn't work out. 9 months later, I looked for another job. So I started working at a big insurance company in the city that I lived. Worked there for a couple of years, and I did some work on a startup then. That was like in the fashion retail industry as well. So that was a job that I had for a year or so, and I don't know. And then I ended up at my current role just by sheer chance that I was basically boring my brain out at the insurance company. And then it was like, I need to change something, because my wife was thinking me to be too much of a grouch back home. So she literally basically instructed me like, okay, you're going to find a new job because this one is not working for you. You need more excitement in the technical challenges. Probably she was able to tell me that because she's a school teacher. And it was like, I was like, do I have to? Because I don't like looking for jobs. So I went looking, and I basically got offered one of these red pill, blue pill situations at Stream. It was like, you can go into developer relations, or you can be like one of the senior engineers on the SDK team. pick your poison. And I basically went left
Mm.
and went head on into developer relations on the technical side at Stream, just because I don't know, that felt like fun, because I've been doing my podcast since the Corona pandemic. I've been doing these developer events, been doing conferences, and so I know what a conference is about, both as an attendee, as a speaker, as an organizer. And I was like, yeah, I wanna try something new. So, and the fun thing is with Stream, I get to write articles. I created the odd video here and there. I get
Mm.
to lead a few other developer relations engineers to make sure that they keep working and have like good stuff. And I have like an amazing manager that has a lot of experience in the Flutter ecosystem, and he's like half my age, but there's so much that he's teaching me just about, okay, how do you market stuff to developers without being a sleaze, and how do you actually create value for our company by bringing value to other people. It's like really a weird thing that you do with developer marketing. You just provide value, you provide value, you provide value, and then at some point the other end, they start thinking, yeah, these people are actually nice. They don't provide value and then take off my arm immediately. No, they just keep on giving value, so maybe I should check them out. And then of course we have an
Yeah.
excellent product and excellent documentation, and we're amazing, and like unicorns and angels singing, and it's like, whoa, this thing is actually pretty good, I should buy this. And that's the thing, you want people to come to our company, our product, because they think that we do an awesome job, and not because we tell them that we're the best thing ever. Which, of course, I think we are, but that's not something you can say out loud in your material that you try and present to people.
Yeah, and when you were deciding between like senior and developer relations, what was your thinking? Was you wanted to, you said try something new, and since you had been doing like the podcast and the conferences, you were more open to like getting involved in the community, right?
Yeah. I was already a big believer in the importance of community, because it's amazing if you go to a conference yourself and you make a point out of like connecting with people at the event. Trust me, there will be a point in time in the future that one of these people that you talk to will actually come back to you, or you can come back to them, and something happens that wouldn't have been possible if you did not go to this conference. Another life lesson here. So I've been doing like software development since 2002, so that's over 2 decades now. And during that journey, there was like 2 times over that I ventured a little bit out of software development, but that was more in like the team lead, managerial, working technical person type roles. So that's like stuff that I liked doing, but I wasn't really enjoying to the fullest. So I stepped back into like a CI role again, being on IC role, I should say, not otherwise, in an individual contributor role. So doing actual hands-on coding all day again, as long as you can do coding in these Scrum projects nowadays. And I basically got back into coding again and again and again. And with developer relations, it's like I can keep on coding, but I can do enough different things that are related to my main task of knowing code and writing code, that it's like it stays interesting, because I know for a fact that if I do a project for like a year or longer, because I did that quite a few times, yeah, at some point you just know the code base as the back of your hand, and there's a lot less excitement, because a big code base just moves slower compared to a small new code base.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what's the thing with developer relations and with like all these sample projects that we're creating? Yes, it's true. It's not production level code that we're writing. You're just trying to show the basics. You're trying to show a specific feature or some aspect that you're talking about, but it's different all the time. And the core of the problem that you're solving is quality, but it's not quality to the level that is production level quality. Because I do know that if you want to write production level code also in Swift, uh, you better make sure that half of your code is error handling, because otherwise you will fail in production. And yeah, and that's the thing. That's the core of my choice, that I was able to keep on coding, but also make sure that it's different all the time. And there's new skills that I can learn. Because one of the things I'm trying to do right now, and sorry for saying it out loud, but I'm trying to get a little bit into React web development, specifically not React Native, I might add. Sorry for that.
Yeah.
Never going to
No,
touch,
it's fine. It's
never
fine.
going to touch React Native with a long stick. But React Web does seem to have its merits, and especially with Next.js, it's a lot of fun. You can really move quickly, and that's one of the things that's possible because of the role that I'm in now. I can just do something fun or different every now and then. And if it would be like a team member, SDK developer, product developer, it's like the product that you're working on, and there might be some big choices technically that are made within the product. And I really enjoyed my work at an earlier startup that was like full stack development. So we were doing everything from with 4 team members from the database all the way to the front end, which was an iPad app, and everything in between.
Yeah.
And I noticed that I really liked that as well. You know, the diversity. One day you're like debugging database queries. The next day you're trying to figure out if there's some workload that you can transfer over from a monolith service into like a Lambda based service, so that you get like functions in the cloud instead of like a VPS service, because it's much more elastic. It scales well and it executes super quickly if you want to, because you can scale it up, and then once you're done you can scale it down again, so you only have cost the moment that you're executing. And yeah, that broadness of the things that you do on a day to day, that's really what pulled me into developer relations. At least that's what I hoped that it would give me, and thus far it seems to be providing that challenge to me.
Yeah. That's like the allure of why some people like startups, and that's I'm fairly similar too. Like I like working on new technologies and different projects.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun to kind of get to tinker around with them
Yeah, well, working at
and just
startup
see what you could do.
does have drawbacks, of course, because the one thing that you have to be able to cope with working in a startup is that the company that you enter, like just a month later, it could already look very different compared to when a month ago, and like 6 months down the line, you won't even recognize the company that you got started with anymore, because things change so quickly, and also the focus on delivery and making sure that that certain things happen in time is much bigger with startups. And it's not a cutthroat thing at all, but for some people they have a very hard time with just the idea that if the product is not executed well enough, then there won't be a company like 6 or 9 months from now. Fortunately, Stream is much more healthier than that. Yeah, it is something you have to be aware of with startups. And you had this whole VC downturn like a year ago by now already, and that was a
Oh yeah.
rough patch for a lot of people, because in the news it was like all these people being let go from the big tech companies, but this same drama was happening in smaller startup type companies as well. And even at my current employer, there was some tough decisions that they just had to make, because yeah, there wasn't like venture capital up for grabs anymore. That was assumed that it would be available sometime in that year, but all of a sudden that whole prospect was gone. And it was either you have to you have to cut weight, or, and that's a horrible comparison because it's actual people that you're talking about, but you had to cut a lot of financial related things to make sure that you just had the means to be able to continue on with the team that you were left with after these difficult decisions. And and a lot of companies have failed in the past year, and that's something you have to be able to cope with if you're doing startup work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to be okay with the risks. You mentioned before that you stayed at your first job a little bit too long.
Yeah, that's it's not a regret, but in hindsight, I would have told my younger self, yeah, 5 years that at this first company and would have been fine, you know. And and why would I say that? It's just because I left this company after 9 years, and it was a difficult decision. I actually cried about making this decision, because it was like cutting off a limb, figuratively speaking. Not as painful, of course, but it was really like I had to like uh, basically say goodbye to something that was so integral to my identity, because after 9 years, the person that you are is then highly intertwined with the work that you're doing. And that made it extra difficult. But I think it would have been better for me if I would have left this first job earlier, not because it was a bad company, because it's a great company and they still are, but just because the trajectory of my career, it just accelerated a lot by switching jobs in time. And I think it's good if people stick around at a company for like at their first employment for like a couple years, probably even 5 years, because you don't want to have a resume that's like Swiss cheese. So it's a balance that you have to strike. You have to have your reasons to make a switch, because it's better for you as an individual, it's better for you financial, it's better for you geographically. uh, don't switch jobs just for the heck of it, but have your reasons to do it, because down the line, when you're in the interview, you can clearly explain, yeah, I switched those jobs because of these and these reasons. And that is, if you stick with those reasons, then you have like a good story when you're interviewing for your next job. And the reason I wanted to switch earlier is just the career trajectory that it opened up for me, just having switched jobs. And maybe I lucked out a little bit with the whole Apple iOS ecosystem exploding back at that time. Who knows?
Yeah.
But it's always good to ride the wave of like progress, right?
Yeah. Yeah, like that's what some people did, right? Like a couple years ago. Well, not a couple years ago, but like during COVID, after the initial like hit, when not that many, there weren't as many people to fill the jobs
Yeah.
that were out there, and like developers were getting super high amounts of like salary.
Yeah, well, the one thing that I noticed with COVID is that all of a sudden you were able to get, well, not Silicon Valley level paychecks, but paychecks that go a long way in that direction. So me switching from like an in-office job to a job that is like fully remote, because I work 5 days from my own attic for stream. It really had a significant impact on my monthly pay, because not only did I switch from a Dutch company to a more US oriented company, it was also a startup, and it was a startup that was. It's not in the biggest of tech hubs in the US. It's in the Colorado Denver area, which is a smaller, lesser known technical hub in the United States, but still a significant one. And that also had an impact on what this company was willing to put down for a developer role. And just these three things, they well, it's not a life-changing amount of money, but it was significant enough that it did play a large part in considering the role.
Yeah, and for someone who doesn't know what Stream is, what do you think is like the most powerful or benefits that it provides?
Um, it's a bit like people, they know Superbase and they know Firebase, right? So like these utilities or these platforms that you can use that take care of large chunks of your functionality. Because if you take Superbase, you have a solid database and you can do authentication with ease. And the same holds true with what Stream offers, but we are a little bit more focused on specific areas. And there's three main products that we're running right now. The first is that the first one that we had was like a feeds based product. So if you have like X, previously called Twitter, like timeline, just like have a single source of events that is like broadcast to uh, tens of thousands end user devices, if not millions. That's a specific architecture that you need, and it's an architecture that is uh, well, it's quite costly to set up if you want to be able to scale with it, and Stream offers that as a service. The second product that we have is a more chat-oriented backend with related front-end SDKs. So I'm of course a little bit more experienced with our own SDK, the Stream SDK. And what that means is you can give me like a blank slate in Xcode, and in like a day I can have a pretty well rounded, full featured chat application running that has like all the usual features that you would expect in a chat oriented like environment. and that's our chat SDK. So really, you can build a solid chat experience in days instead of weeks or months if you would roll it on your own, and also to a level of quality that you would not be able to achieve on a similar level if you would execute on it on your own. Well, at least not in a cost-effective way. And the third product that we have in beta right now is pretty much the same idea as chat, but then for video. And the video
Mhm.
product that we have created and that we're still perfecting because it's in beta, but it's going to be launching soon, is that it's a video platform that allows you to do anything with video, really. So you can do group chats with it, you can do one-on-one chats with it, you can do like live stream type activities with it, so that you have like a single video feed that goes out to like thousands of people, uh, or even more if you want to, because that infrastructure we all laid down with edge nodes, and it's like capacity. It's like, well, if we have a live event on the video platform, you we literally see we literally see the dollar amount increasing in the bill at our service providers. And for certain aspects of our infrastructure, we specifically did not use a specific service provider because of cost reasons. But of course, we did that for a customer, and this customer was very happy that we were able to execute with such a scale, uh, to such a level of quality for their video requirements. And it's like, yeah, it's like you take our SDK, you register for a product, and you can just drop in components, and you have a chat feature. Same for video. You can just register for a platform, drop in components, and you have a video solution in your product. And this can be as simple as customer support one-on-one chats. It can be like what we're using right now. We're recording on a platform that gives us video, and you can record the audio to a high level of quality. um, or it could be that you want to have like you have like a workshop type thing. It's you doing a presentation, and you have like 100 people listening, and we can just offer that with ease, really, with our platform. um, yeah, and that's what we're trying to build with Stream. It's the CEO, he likes to call it like the AWS of components. And our component toolbox is still relatively small, but we're trying to add really cool, really well built components to our toolbox that we offer to our customers. And I'm not even sure yet what we're going to build after video, but I do know that like half a year from now, maybe a year, video will be done, and we will be on to the next quality idea.
Yeah, I really like because it brings down the barrier to
Yeah,
entry for developers. Like, because you don't, like, if you were gonna build your own streaming video
yeah.
service like on iOS, you'd have to like go ahead and go in and master AV Foundation and a whole bunch of other stuff.
And not only that, that's just the client side aspect. You also need the infrastructure, the edge nodes, the repetition of video feeds, that you send your video feed to a scalable forwarding unit that then broadcasts out to other geographic areas in the world, so that people can actually watch the feed with low latency and high quality, at least according to their own local bandwidth. And I've been in some calls with some of the cloud engineers of Stream, and it's the stuff that they're building. It's like, yeah, it's literally a globe spanning network of infrastructure that supports the chat and video platform, and the feeds platform, really. Because it is true that the expertise and the knowledge and the things that we learned with feeds was taken into chat, and the things that we learned there and with feeds, that's then transferred into what we're building with video as well. So it's really a rolling chunk of knowledge that we're developing. And if you would want to if you would want to get that level of quality, that level of scale, that level of reliability, you would need to hire like tens of people to just even come close to it. And cost effectively, no, never. And that's what they're trying to do, be like the best solution at a price point that is like, well, we're not cheap, of course, but it is an acceptable price point compared to what you're getting for it. So it's something, if you want to have a solid chat feature in your product, you know that you have like a specific amount that you have to pay each month. But you do know that, like with my conference organizing, you know that it's taken care of and that you get quality, and that when you need support, you get good support, and we make sure that you as a customer are happy because your customers are happy.
Yeah. So you mentioned like you had like 20 years of experience, right, in
Yeah.
software. So what would you say is your biggest takeaway?
Well, you really might like make me sound like an old guy now. So I'm only 44. Uh, it's like well, the one thing that I learned is make sure that you're not the technology that you're working with today. Uh, Try and understand what's underneath the frameworks and the product that you're working with, because that's expertise and knowledge that you can take with you. And if you look at just the language that you're working with, or a specific framework or an API that you're working with, that's just sugarcoating on core principles that are underneath that. And I think it's important to understand what makes the machine tick, because if you can do that, then most software development challenges that you will run into, they comparatively, of course, get easy, because it's I everybody always says that software development is such a fast moving field, and there's like developments that are like constant and everything changes every year. Yes, that's true, but that's in the syntax, that's in the APIs, that's in the SDKs. But software development in essence, that hasn't changed in the last 50 years. It's all just code that is executed by a dumb machine that just happens to nowadays look smart because it can do these calculations so insanely quickly. And I think that's the best piece of advice that I can give people. Try and understand what makes the machine tick. And I'm not talking about like machine language level, but the core principles that are underneath it. Know what an algorithm is. Understand why something is slow. Understand the trade-offs in your execution between memory and CPU, so that sometimes you can trade in memory to make it less CPU intensive. But if the constraint that you're working with is memory, then maybe you can just throw more CPU at it and have an acceptable result.
Yeah, and do you have like a recommendation for people to do that in like iOS and Swift specifically?
I think that if you look at the and not the introductory documentation by Apple, but the more the developer documentation, if you really go into an SDK and read what is written there, that's very very good content to get to the bits that make a machine tick. But also the very technical talks at the WWDC. So you have like the State of the Union. There's like, we have amazing API, and then there's talk, we have API, it's amazing, this is what you can do with it. There's always a few talks that if you watch them on first glance, it's like, what are these guys talking about? What framework is it? No, and they're really talking about in-depth mechanics. How does the memory work? How does scheduling work? What are some of the trade-offs that you need to make when designing something in the Swift language? And I think those are really good to pick. Not that you watch them all, but just pick a few. And don't underestimate algorithm class in your education, because it was tough material to get through. And understanding like algorithmic complexity, the typical big O notation. You don't have to be able to do it on a paper or like on a whiteboard, because I don't like those types of coding interviews. But having like the general concepts down of what the effect of complexity is in the thing that you're executing, that really helps you understand a lot of these things. And I think what I always really liked was yeah, I'm not, I really sound like this pedantic obnoxious guy now, but just know your data structures. Just know
Yeah.
what a difference it makes if you use a list or you use a bag, or so if you know those differences, then because you don't need to know like red and black trees and all that stuff, but know that what the significant differences are between using an array and using a dictionary. Know why it is different. And there's some good books on there, like Swift algorithms, and there's Manning Publishing has like a really nice introductory book that is like grokking complexity and grokking algorithms. Those are two book recommendations that are there. I found them very enjoyable to read because the explanations that they give are very much they're easily to digest really, and it's not like these tomes of like endless pages of like really thin paper, because I remember that algorithm book, like the fourth edition, and it was basically too heavy to lift. It was like this green book with like a sort of like a mobile on it, with like mobile as in the sense a thing that you hang on the ceiling and that babies enjoy, with like these red leaf type things on it. People who know the book, they go like, oh no, no, he's talking about that book. And
That's very
yeah,
intimidating.
it's an intimidating book to pick up, even because it's heavy. Yeah, and just, also make sure that you're not just about software development. Develop yourself in other aspects of a person as well, because I come across too many people that are just about software development and they know nothing beyond that. And the easiest thing to do that is that if you have some time off, it's fine to not be coding all day. Go out, go on a vacation every now and then, enjoy yourself, and read a book or two or watch some telly, which is not only science fiction.
Yeah, that's some great advice and life advice, to be honest. Like,
Yeah, it's
is going out for walks, like those, like if you're stuck on a solution or
oh yeah,
something or a problem, like
best debugging trick if you're stuck on something with software development is taking a shower. Trust me on that one. Not everybody can do it because you run into the problem while you're working in an office, but I've come to the conclusion that if I'm stuck on something, I just need to drop it and do something else and then come back to it. And either you already came up with an approach that might work, or the moment you sit down and open it up again, something will come to you that will help you dig out of the hole that you put yourself in.
wait, so what do you do then? Do you really go take a shower in the middle?
I've got multiple approaches because I have the luxury of working at home, and I do hope that my employer is not listening right now. Okay, I say that tongue in cheek, but there have been occasions that I literally just got fed up with what I was working on because I was stuck, and I just went out for a run, like half an hour, take a shower, 15 minutes. So like 45 minutes later, I was back again. I did neatly indicate, hey, I'm off for a run. I'll be back in an hour. So it was like communicated AFK time. Or literally just sometimes I'm in the attic. I go downstairs, make some coffee, or just talk to my kids if they're at home, and then go back up again like 10 minutes later. Just like just to like switch focus in your head. Switch yourself off and on again. It's almost like the Windows solution. Just reset the machine, and it'll work
Yeah,
better again.
just hit it on the side of the head.
I wouldn't call that a solid approach to start hitting yourself, but just literally just resetting your mental framework. And yes, it will take time to get back in the zone and get all the moving bits again if you're coding. And that's also part of the enjoyment of coding. Sometimes you have these days that you literally just you sit down, you open up your editor and you open up some documentation and you start typing, and then all of a sudden you look up again and it's like 4 hours later, and you're like, what happened? Oh, there's all this code that I wrote. Oh, it looks pretty good actually. I'm hungry. So that sometimes that happens, and also don't beat yourself up if you're not getting into the zone all the time. That's normal. That's human behavior.
Is is some of that stuff you mentioned? Do you do that to also maintain healthy? Because as a developer, like we're in front of the screen like a lot, sitting
Oh
down
yeah,
and
yeah. Sometimes I have these days that I know that the schedule is intense. We have some deliveries that we need to make. So some copywriting that needs to be done. An article needs to be finished by the end of the afternoon. And then especially during those times that it's like, okay, I need to finish this, and this, and it's like time crunch. Especially on those days, it's weird, but if you actually allow yourself scheduled to take a break, to take your lunch and to take a break again sometime in the afternoon, you actually get more done compared to if you would have been sitting down for 8 hours straight. And it's counterintuitive, but it's literally just getting up and getting the blood flowing again. Just taking some time off during the day. The 15-minute break that actually makes you more productive when you're back on keys again. And it's totally counter to what you would think, because culture with software development is really about, like, yeah, you push on till you till you achieve results, and it's like, yeah, we go coding on non-stop and eat pizzas and be amazing, like the hackathon mindset.
Yeah.
But what people never show is how these people are doing, like the 2 days after the hackathon, because they've been like, well, they feel that they've been super productive for 48 hours, and yes, they did achieve a lot. But if you would average that time out on the 4 days that they need to like be human again afterwards, then you could consider, were they really that productive or not? It's just that everything was crunched in a short time span, and there was a lot of recovery involved afterwards.
Yeah. And that's something I mean, because I knew this before, but sometimes, there's periods where you are doing a lot of work and focus on a lot of things. But then
Yeah,
you have to kind of remember and realize, like, oh, I do need to take breaks throughout the day. And once you actually do
yeah,
that, you notice, oh wow, I'm getting a lot more done.
yeah. And it's also just getting up, like taking a break, grabbing a drink downstairs, in my case, uh, walking to the coffee machine if you're in an office environment. It also allows you to really, when you walk back to your desk, I make a conscious exercise to really think, okay, am I doing right now what is the most effective thing to do? So I'm actually, the last 2 minutes before I get started working again, I'm actually planning in my head and reviewing in my head, okay, what is the next best thing to do? And should I keep on doing what I was doing before I took this break? And then, and sometimes it's like, yeah, I'm doing fine. And sometimes it's like, you really want to hit yourself in the head, because it's like, oh man, I'm being
Yeah.
stupid right now because of such and such reasons. And that's also just giving you the distance to your work. It also gives you the allowance to really basically reflect on what you're doing, and if you're actually effective with what you're doing, because it can feel very productive to just be typing all the time, but if you're typing the wrong thing, how productive are you?
Yeah, you're just busy doing busy work.
Yeah, but then you're a bunch of gophers doing like interesting stuff.
That's a very like important skill, and I don't even know if it's a skill, but like knowing what to focus on, like what's the most effective thing you could do right now.
Yeah, and that's also the hardest, because I'm like really bad at it. Because my nature is to just like hammer down the most pressing thing in front of me, because that's my nature. And I noticed that if I can suppress that tendency to just whack the most annoying thing in front of me, then I'm actually much more productive. And I have these weeks that I'm just doing a whack-a-mole job all the time. And it's like at the end of the week, it's like, oh, I did it again. I really feel like Britney Spears then. And other times it's like you're ahead of yourself, and it's like, okay, I should not be doing this, and okay, let's stop this and focus on something that is more effective or more result oriented right now. Because yeah, it's so easy with a computer especially to get distracted with, well, so many
Yeah,
things really,
the whole
and then
internet's there.
doing doing the wrong thing is so easy.
So you mentioned earlier that you don't like the data structure and interview questions for like an iOS position. So
Yeah,
what questions do you like? And I'm assuming that you've carried out interviews like as an interviewer.
yeah, I did.
So what's your approach to that?
Well, first of all, it depends a bit on what level of interview it is, because usually you have like the introductory technical interview and then the in-depth technical interview. So first of all, when doing an interview with a candidate, I really want them to like relax a little, because most people in an interview, they have, there's a lot riding on that for them, because they either need a job or they're looking for a better job. And so I want them to to basically take down the heart rate a little bit. That they just relax. So I tend to like ask, well, it's not personal things because you have to be careful that you don't overstep your boundaries, but I do try and entice them to talk a little bit about things that they enjoy, hobbies, or if it's clear that they're a pet owner, just ask them about their dog or cat or hamster, and just get them talking a bit on something that is, at least in the context of things, is, it feels like it's not important, but it does. Just because people are talking, it relaxes them. So that's the first thing. And then I really want to like go over a bit over their resume, have some questions there. Okay, what's this? What did you do there? And just verify, but also get some more depth into their resume. And once you did that, just ask a few technical questions, but more in a sort of like a discussion type format. So it's like suppose I have this and this and this, and I need this result. What would be like a good approach to get that? So that could be like data storage oriented. Like, I've got some data that comes in from the network as JSON. I parse it. I need to store it somewhere. And I need to make sure that's on the screen. But I also need to take care of like offline situations. What are some good approaches there? And then you can really start talking about it. And then you really get to know if people have some exposure to typical frameworks that you would expect matching their profile. And then you just get like the technical discussion going, because yes, you can do like a pop quiz on all kinds of minutia, but that doesn't tell you anything, because to be honest, I don't know how you do your coding, but I'm like looking in documentation half of the time to figure out what API I need to call, and some aspects I do know from the top of my head, but most of it I have to look up.
Yeah.
And that's the same. You wouldn't force people to all of a sudden be walking encyclopedias, and anyway, and that's what you do with these weird interviews. And then you get like a feel of what their technical jobs are, and then if they pass, then they go on to a more in-depth technical interview, and then there's a bit of a structure. It depends a bit on the candidate, but sometimes it's we I would ask for like a sort of like a short, really short take-home assignment, so something that they spend like an hour or two on, not longer. And it's clear if they overspend time because it's just too much code. So, and that's like things like, hey, create like a create like a list that is backed by a core data storage, and make sure that stuff shows up, and do something interesting, like add an animation or something other fun that you would like to add. Do a good check on the code that it's original, of course, before the interview. And then just talk about it again. Why did you make this decision? And it's always very interesting if there's unit tests or not. I don't care either way, as long as there's like a solid explanation for why they did or did not do it. Because there's no right or wrong. It's just you want to have a discussion on technical merits and find common ground, and then based on that common ground, try and like see what level of understanding they have considering the position that you're hiring for. And then that's a good or bad result from that interview, and there's probably some manager that needs to talk to them, or maybe even CTO of the company, and that's off of my that's not on me. But if I gave a positive result, I do consider the probation time of a contract to be very important. I only hire people under the assumption that they will do fine in their probation time, but still the probation time is really, yeah, that's really where the where the where the where the rubber hits the asphalt. Really, that's where the real work happens. And
Wait,
you
what
don't
is
want.
the probation time?
Well, usually if you sign a contract, it's like you have like a 1 month probation trial period, they call it sometimes. It's in, I don't know how it works in your jurisdiction, but in the jurisdiction that I live, Dutch law, it's like if you sign a year-long contract, there's a probation time or a trial period both ways for both the employer and the employee. And you can like call off the agreement, no questions asked, no costs for both ends, in like the first 2 or 4 weeks. And that's really like that's when you see people working hands-on with colleagues, doing their work and making sure that they actually match up with what you expected to hire. But you do want to provide them with a environment that is supportive to their onboarding on the code base, because you cannot expect somebody that you just drop in in a code base, unsupported, no guidance, nothing, that they will do okay. Because some people will, but you do want to make sure that they have like a good onboarding process, and then you know quickly enough whether or not the the water works in your head, all the touchy feeling stuff, whether or not that worked out
Yeah.
in this case or not. So it's really, I tend to prefer a much more organic process there. And again, you do check your references and you make sure that the person is actually legit and that they don't have any lies on their resume, because that's a red flag. That's an immediate no hire.
Well, thank you, Jeroen, for coming on the show. Where can the people find you?
They can find me online on several platforms. Just look for AppForce1, AppForce numeral 1. On X, previously called Twitter. I also got an account on Mastodon. Easiest is actually to just look at appforce1.net. That's my personal website, and there's some links on there. I have some blogs and also links to my podcast, because if you're an iOS developer, you might want to listen to that one as well. Mostly interview-based content there. And that's about it. Just look for AppForce1.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely check out the podcast. We didn't even get to talk about it, but I've checked it out and I've enjoyed the few episodes.
Cool. Yeah, it's always great to hear that people enjoy the stuff that you put online, because it's always, you never know what people think of it unless they tell you. So it's always good. Content creators, give them feedback, let them know what you think of it, because they really love getting feedback, positive or negative.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of the iOS Dev Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you guys like, comment, share, subscribe, and consider sending this to a fellow developer. If you want to support the show, you can leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and even consider joining the Patreon.